One of the more interesting things that happened last night, Connor, was when I messaged you to ask if you were still good to record a day, and you were like, yes, and then you informed me you had never seen Psycho.
I've never seen the film before. I have seen, like, obviously the classical scenes of, like, the shower scene, which has obviously, like, been interpreted in so many different ways in pop culture.
I think it's just so known in terms of, like, it's like, no, I'm your father.
Yeah.
It's Bruce Willis is dead at the end of Sixth Sense. I'm sorry if that's how you got spoiled for you. I'm sorry if that's...
On this video. There's so many things that I love and like about it, but in terms of structure-wise, it's a bit like... I don't know, because I didn't know the shower scene happened so early on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I literally thought that was at the end of the film.
Right.
I thought it went like, oh, like, obviously, like, she's the main character, like... I thought she was going to be doing like some investigating around the house, whatnot. And then I thought the shower scene was going to come like at the end, and then like they get him, and then he does the whole "wouldn't hurt a fly" thing. So then when it happened in the middle, I was like, oh, I was like, what the hell? Okay, right, okay, she's dead. Cool. What the hell do we do now? I was interested. I was like, oh, where the hell is this going to go? But I think. Yeah, it's such a weird move.
Yeah,
what a bold-ass move to make. Damn, Hitchcock.
This is still personally a top 3 horror for me.
Okay.
Like, it's one that I remember thinking that when I first watched it. Like, this is amazing. I remember that, like, when I revisit the film, still think, this is fucking class. And even, like, now when I've gotten more into horror, I still watch this film and go, I mean, I can't, like, take it down for me personally. I think there's just too much to like.
If I didn't know that he was his mother and the killer, it would have been so like more interesting.
Okay,
because I think it's the film does really well with the twists and the turns and sort of slowly like giving you new hints, and new evidence and stuff.
This was Hitchcock's first horror film, like actual horror film.
Okay.
Wouldn't be his last because he did The Birds as well. But
more birds. Man's obsessed with birds.
Fucking birds, man. See, he was known as the master of suspense. He was known for thrillers. Thrillers were more of his thing, and this was his first horror film. And what's kind of... And because I was trying to think about this as well, because this was another thing Robbie went to me at one point. It wasn't in the during the intermission. It was like after off the record when we were just chatting, and I said, "Oh, Psycho's like top tier horror for me," and he went like, "It's not a horror film." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, it's another dumb thing Robbie says, because it's not a horror film. I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes like, just because there's murder in it doesn't make it a horror film. You don't look at Gone Girl and go, "That's a horror." Which book was it? It was it wasn't the Book of Horror. It was the Studying Horror Cinema book that mentioned the fact how like the film kind of does play, like it starts off more as a thriller and it plays more as a thriller until the shower scene, and then right then it's like, oh, this is a horror now. It's caused the audience who's watching just a typical Hitchcock thriller up until that point that now they're told that something more sinister is upon. The definitions of each genre is you get thriller, which is a genre with numerous often overlapping subgenres, which includes like crime, horror, detective. Thrillers are characterized and defined by the moods they elicit, giving the audience heightened feelings of suspense, excitement, surprise, anticipation, and anxiety. So it's more of like the build of something is more thrillery. Horror, it's a genre that is intended to disturb, frighten, or scare. So again, I think it's more of like, and again, I think you do look at the Marion Crane sections and you go like, okay, yeah, it is building the anxiety.
Yeah, she's on
it
the
is
run.
building the suspense, where you got the police officer following her. That's not a horror set piece. That is a thriller set piece. Whereas I think once we see the murder happen, one the shower scene is meant to disturb, it's meant to shock, it's meant to frighten.
It was.
Yeah, it is genuinely.
Even though it's like an old film and stuff, and obviously we've had countless of like gore and stuff in recent films and blah blah blah. I guess it is just the quality of how it's made as well. I think
it's the cuts.
Even just like seeing the shadow come up to like the shower curtain.
The use of the dead space.
Yeah,
and then
it's
just
so
like
good. Yeah.
using the
And
shower
obviously-
curtain that's diffusing the shadow, that's making it uncanny. It's
Yeah.
just we can only look at the film knowing what it is.
Yeah.
But you also need to try to think about like, well, what would people have known
Exactly.
about it? Because I mean, I'm looking at the poster now. There's nothing really that
Yeah.
identifies
So much
like.
skin. Oh my god.
There is a lot
It's
of
like,
skin.
I'll be like, oh, this sexy film. Oh my god.
There are murders in Thriller, and if we look, I guess, at, again, slight swallows for Gone Girl, if I'm using the example that Robbie threw out in the sense, like, just because there's murder, you don't look at Gone Girl as a horror film.
No.
I think if you look at the scene where Rosamund Pike kills Neil Patrick Harris in that, and compare it to the shower scene,
Yeah.
I think violence in the way Gone Girl's done isn't done in a it's that scene's not trying to frighten us of
'cause
Rosamund
you're
Pike.
from her view as
Yeah.
well. So it's like, yeah.
That's also another
Yeah.
big thing. You're either, I think thrillers either show it from a more voyeuristic point of view where you're just watching a scene play. Again, if you watch Zodiac, there's have you seen Zodiac?
I haven't.
I won't say too much. There is a scene that shows a Zodiac murder, but it's shot more objective, where you're just watching the scene play out. You're not there seeing it from the perspective of the victims.
Yeah.
Anything that involves any horror murder, it is more so from like the point of view from the victim, whereas
Yeah.
like a thriller showing a murder is more so either showing it either from the murderer's perspective or I think from a more audience-based viewpoint. You get shown that scene of the shower scene and the murder and all that, and then I think every other moment from there, from that point of view, from the rest of the film, they do sequences that are suspensefully done.
Yeah.
But I think almost now with the knowledge that we have seen this horrific murder, those thriller set pieces then become horror.
Yeah.
Because you now know. I think that's the other thing, because with thriller, it is suspense, it's anxiety, which means you don't know what's going to happen. You're just on the edge. You'll see that something dangerous is happening. But with horror, you know the danger that's going to happen now.
Yeah. When they saw this film, I don't know if you know, was there any backlash? Was there like, did people hate it? Or like,
It was critically panned at the time.
Was it?
But it was a box office hit.
Oh, okay.
So
of
it was
course,
one of
yeah.
those ones where it
Yeah.
was, yeah. I think it was one of those ones. Again, people were shocked that the main character got killed halfway through the film, and of what they saw
I
as
was
well.
shocked.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Wait, it's now?
Wait,
It's
wait.
happening now?
Damn, you really went there. Oh my god.
I love the section of just like Marion's whole thing about like, get a new car. I need to like hide the money in this
I love
newspaper.
that first section. Yeah.
That is quintessential Hitchcock, is why I will
I could
say
have seen.
again.
I could have watched the whole film of just that.
Yeah.
Of like her on the run. It sort of does what I guess new age horror films do, where it's like the start is always the character that gets murdered first, so you can see. But then, yeah, with this film, it's like, oh no, that's the first half of the whole film,
Yeah.
not
Which I
just the first 10 minutes.
Which I like a lot because,
Yeah.
again, I do think some films, they either take the psycho mentality and they either just make it the beginning,
yeah,
or they do it very too much towards the end where it's like, oh, well, like, or like they're in the third act
yeah,
and then the main character dies. It's like, wait, how's the film going to end now then?
yeah,
Whereas, like, I do like this a little bit more in the sense of it's the in-between, in the sense of, like, we get plenty of Marion. You actually have an opinion on on this character.
oh yeah,
But
yeah.
it doesn't go further enough to even, like, let her have an ending. Any other thriller might have shown Norman pick up the newspaper, see there's money
See
in
the
it,
money
and
and
he's like, oh, well, I'll keep the money. He literally just gets
Just
it, throws
flings
it
it in
in the
the
boot, and then
car.
it's gone. The whole reason for
the first,
the film
yeah.
really happening is just, that doesn't matter now. Which does throw in a thing. I was like, well, now what?
yeah, it is quite interesting. It keeps you guessing.
People say that this is probably the most important horror film in the history of horror, in the sense of because beforehand horror is more fantastical. It's more, it is more of the fantasy and the other world really. Whereas like this does, it is the film that's like, oh yeah, well, evil can lurk in any man.
Yeah, I feel like with that as well, like obviously with the whole like the psychopath thing, and the fact that although I did not like the end section, I thought it was interesting that like I don't feel like was there a film around that time that actually would delve into such like mental illnesses and such
Not before
that
then, really.
level of psyche and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I found that really interesting.
There is no confirmation if he was a serial killer, was there? I don't think.
No, not really. I mean, they mentioned, oh, have you got the missing case of those other two
That was
girls?
right. Yeah, that is right. Yeah.
So
there is.
all in the swamp.
Yes. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. That was a good sequence of when he's
Yes.
first dumping the Marion's car in the
Yeah. I kind of laughed.
Yeah, no,
in
there is a
way.
bit of like
There's the comedy bit
levity.
where it's like it stops and he's like, oh shit, damn it,
Keeps going.
and then it cuts back and it's like, and he's like, hell
It's
yeah.
good. In 1960, where you were conditioned more so if you were reading horror fiction, watching horror fiction, you're more so like conditioned to be like, oh, well, anything that's really scary doesn't exist. Vampires are scary; they're scary creatures, but they don't exist, so it's fine. Or like, well, the 50s had a weird like alien invasion fear as well, where it's like, or like aliens can come down, but we don't need to worry about that. But the fact of like it can be
Anyone.
a bloke, it can be a man. The book itself was inspired by the 1957 murders of Ed Gein.
Oh, of course. It all comes back to Mr.
Ed Gein, who Leatherface, Buffalo Bill,
Charlie Hunnam.
in what?
He's playing Ed Gein.
Oh, okay. Yes, he is.
Yeah.
I don't like that. And then the book, Psycho, was written, and Norman Bates was a middle-aged man.
Oh.
And then the screenwriter of Psycho, whose name is... Where is he at? Joseph Stefano,
Caslin.
I believe it. The fucking skeleton's hiding the name. Joseph Stefano wrote it more of like a young man, which I think works a lot better.
I think so as well. There's a lot of chemistry with Marianne. There was a lot of like, oh, there's sort of something going on here. Like
He's kind of just like a quaint, quiet, shy.
He's a little goofy as well.
He's a little bit of a
goofball. Like,
but he's also not like unappealing of it. Like
No,
they've chosen Anthony Perkins, who's this like tall, slim.
He is charming.
He's got a charm to him.
Yeah.
Trying to like take yourself out, knowing that he's already the killer. Do you think before the shower scene, there's any form of like unease with him?
yeah, there's little hints, but I don't think it's not like he's not portrayed as like, oh, I'm like kind of a creepy dude.
There's nothing that's necessarily identifying him as the threat.
No,
really.
he seems quite like unthreatening as a person as well, and like he seems nice. There is a sort of element of like he seems like there's with the whole thing with his mother. It's
when that gets mentioned. That's when he starts being a bit
you
more.
can sort of, even in the performance, he's a bit like a little boy-ish. Like even with like his like goofball personality. But I think the only switch up is when they're in the room with the birds and they have that sort of like deep conversation about the traps and stuff.
Yeah.
And then you sort of like, oh, he's getting a bit passionate about this. He's getting a bit, like he's really like talking about it and stuff. And
He's defensive within that sense
he is.
as well, yeah. I'm not scared by this film, but it is a scary film.
Yeah.
In the sense of like just seeing the shower scene is unsettling because it's this loud shrieking music. It's these quick cuts of seeing like a blade hit her, seeing a scream, seeing the knife go down. He's fully in shadow.
Yeah.
He's basically a silhouette.
Not even the shower scene, the one with the investigator as well.
When Arbogast gets stabbed, it's
so
one of
good.
it's one of the best jump scares in the
Yeah.
sense of just like it's the top down, runs
so
out.
Good.
It's
The,
well
the
done.
camera movement on that whole section alone
Oh,
is
yeah.
ridiculous with the stairs and everything.
Oh yeah, which I think was a back projector, even though it is based in real world horror, and it's moving away from the gothic fantasy horror. And I know the choice to shoot in black and white was a budgetary price reason, not a stylistic reason. But it really, but there's shots that look gothic. And I mean, look at the fucking house.
The house is beautiful.
The eye when he's looking through the peephole, just that really close-up shot is just gorgeous.
Yeah. The transitions from the mother's like face.
One of my favorite things.
So good.
It's gothic, stylistic. You can feel it is. Oh, well, this is set like late 50s.
Yeah.
That it feels contemporary.
Yeah.
But there's moments where it's like, okay, so it is that weird overlap in the sense that visually you are associating it with gothic horror, but everything else about it isn't. So I think it is almost like a nice I feel like it is almost a nice transition. If you are, for some reason, trying to go through horror chronologically,
yeah,
if you are getting to this, like, it's not jumping from, well, I've gone from ghouls and goblins and vampires, and now all of a sudden there's like serial killers. What? There is that, or like unintentionally, Psycho is like a good bridge of horror. And I don't think if we didn't have Psycho, we wouldn't have the slasher films. We wouldn't have the film.
Probably not.
We wouldn't have films like, again, Black Christmas,
Christmas,
Texas Chainsaw. We wouldn't have Halloween. There's there's none of that without initiating the fact that like real world fear can be done in horror fiction.
Even The Shining. I mean, The Shining's one of my favorite films of all time.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, I can see there's so much influence.
Because even Shining, although not real world horror, it does a nice mix in the sense of the true fear isn't, well, there's ghosts in the Overlook Hotel. It's you're seeing a man lose his sanity.
Yeah.
That's where that, like, that's where the actual terror is.
Yeah.
Hitchcock as a filmmaker, again, if you watch more of his stuff, you'll see a lot of his performances in his films they're not usually the gripping point with it.
Yeah.
He gets really good actors in the films and they give good performances, but a lot of his stuff is never like, wow, what a performance that was. Like, he gets James Stewart to just do something really, to do his thing.
Okay.
Which is interesting, because I think Psycho is very well performed.
I think the performances are great.
I think, the
main cast,
specifically as Janet Leigh and Anthony Perkins, I still stand by thinking Anthony Perkins is one of the best male actor performances ever, personally.
Yeah.
It's even more interesting knowing that he's the killer watching it, like the film with it. And I like Vera Miles and John Gavin. I like them.
They're all right.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're more typical Hitchcock in the level of, like, you're doing good. That's all I need you to do right now.
They're like typical, like, 60s film actors.
Yeah. They're saying the line, and I need are you going to
Mm.
move out here, Norman? I bet you've got the 40,000 right here. Yeah, it's just...
It's going to look sexy and similar, and
it is very like, I'm broad and I'm looking very dashing right now. It's very like that. Whereas, like, again, which I do think is quite refreshing to see Anthony Perkins doing his thing.
Yeah.
That is just kind of like, it's weirdly more modern. It's a very modern performance.
His little twitches and his little, like, his face is so, like, expressive, although it's so good. Like, even I was just noting it as I was watching him. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because obviously I knew he was the killer. So I was like, oh, he does like this little laugh. Like, he does like a little... a little... And I was like, okay.
Like, to himself kind of thing. The conversation in, like, the study area with him and Marianne. And he's sat kind of upright. His arms on the arms of the chair. And then he starts talking about the taxidermy and his actual hobby. He's kind of like, he's a bit more expressive. And even to the point where he starts slouching on the chair and he's kind of got his hand, like, he is almost just kind of like lounging a bit. And he's got his hand on, like, one of his taxidermy animals. And then, like, something gets mentioned. Then he just kind of like pulls back. And then you kind of see him, like, it's like, and again, I didn't clock that watching it. But it's like, oh no, but that is very deliberate of Anthony Perkins. Again, whether Alfred Hitchcock told him to do it or he did it.
I love that scene with the private investigator where he's like asking the questions.
Oh, that is good. Yeah,
so good. You can tell that he's like putting on this like confident persona. And like he's eating his fucking like
corn
things.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You want some?" The questions keep getting asked, and then he starts like tripping up a little bit, but like he's still trying to like stay on it, and you can see it in his face. And like
he's not losing it, but you can see there is like a slight like nervousness,
and he starts like stuttering.
Interesting to make that your killer.
Yeah,
like I think that's also another interesting thing. If we're looking at it from the horror genre point of view, and again, you're not meant to know he's the killer. The mother's meant to be this almost looming presence of being the threat of the film, but it is almost more interesting knowing that, like, oh, this guy that I'm kind of feeling for.
Yeah, in a way, like, he's sort of like a bit of an underdog of a character, although he's not supposed to be, but like, obviously with the fact of like, if you're an audience member in the 60s watching this, you're like, that mother, she's horrible. This poor kid, he's like having to clean up the mess and whatnot.
As time went on, especially after the 50s, everyone became more fascinated with flawed characters.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the interest probably came more
Yeah.
in. So, and obviously he is a incredibly flawed character.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the fact that, like,
And he's not cool. That's also another thing, because the 70s, again, when the 70s did flawed characters, they had a habit of making them really fucking cool.
Sexy and cool, yeah.
Like, you look at Al Pacino in Godfather, you look at Robert De Niro in Taxi Driver, those are cool motherfuckers that are bad people. Like, Norman Bates isn't making any Literally Me fan cams.
No. Maybe.
I don't know. I haven't explored that. But yeah, Janet Leigh, again, that simple section you were saying, like, there could be a whole film.
Yeah, I mean, she's great. And I think also with the time as well, like having like a female protagonist.
A flawed female.
Who was flawed, who's running away with money, who's obviously evidently done something like bad.
The film opens with her and Sam, and we know it's a hidden love.
Yeah.
Which is also scandalous.
Immediately, yeah, like during the time you'd be like, oh my God.
We go in the window, we see a woman in her bra. Huh! Oh
What?
dear.
Oh my God.
Oh, well, that must be her husband. That must be her husband. No, it's a hidden relationship. Even more scandal.
And she
steals money. Just all sorts of
Yeah.
just. But again, she's not like doing the performance. Like, I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
Again, there's complications.
You can see the inner thoughts of like, especially when she's on the car shots. And you can definitely see her
it's great.
eyes.
You hear her thoughts.
Yeah.
Brilliant. On this rewatch, I do think the conversation between her and Anthony Perkins is probably the strongest scene in the whole film.
Yeah. It's
It's not the best horror moment. Again, it's interesting because you are seeing two flawed people. Obviously, Norman's got this perception that Marianne is this, she's a pretty woman.
Yeah.
She's very nice, presentable, So, again, he's just kind of talking to her in a way of like, oh, well, I'm just kind of like, well, I'm a shy, nervous, flawed man, and I'm just kind of opening up to this nice lady. Whereas, like, we know, oh, well, she's not a nice, she's not a typical white picket fence lady. She is also got her own, like again, her own complications. So it makes that seem more interesting, where you are seeing these two characters a bit more like, okay, he's gaining something from talking to her, and even she does gain something from talking to him, in the sense that she goes, I'm going to turn back.
There's a weird sense of existentialism throughout the film as well. Of like people being people and actions.
What's the right thing?
Actions.
I think I think if you would boil down Psycho to like a general, it's like, it is what's the right thing.
It's a lot of people making actions and mistakes.
It's only to the very end where like, oh, something successfully has happened.
Yeah.
And I even think that's just luck. Sam gets clocked over the head, and so he's not this big hero that's like, I'm gonna stop the villain. He gets knocked out, and then he only just gets there in the nick of time.
Yeah, I found that interesting, that like,
Norman overpowered him.
Yeah, it was that I will say that scene. It's probably just because it's old, but it was a bit janky.
No,
I was
it
like,
was.
okay.
No, it was a little bit.
Yeah, the editing, I was like, all right, okay. It's just like cut to boom, and then cut to on the floor.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay. Other than that, like, so many shots are so smooth.
Oh god.
Even the first one going through the window. Like,
yeah.
Okay.
It's so good.
All right.
A lot of filmmakers, I think, get confused at what a really well-made film is. I think everyone's trying to make each and every single shot perfect and beautiful, and it needs to be this Blade Runner 2049 level of just
film.
Artistry. Yeah, no one complaining about it. Or like, we need to make it look gorgeous and beautiful, like everything look good. I don't think you can look at Psycho and go, that's a big grandly shot film. But there are so many shots in this film. I was like, that's amazing. Like, they all move the plot forward. Like, every single shot moves
every
it forward.
scene sort of matters, which is...
I can think of, like, several... Like, again, talk about the opening shot, going into the bedroom.
Yeah.
Marion driving, where it's, like, dark behind her, and she's just getting, like, the headlights, like...
Yeah.
That shot. There's the shot of Norman in the study with the owl. There's the looking through the peephole.
The shot of the house.
The shot of the house. There's that one shot where it's where Sam first arrives on his own to the motel, and then Norman stood by the swamp, and it's just that like pushing in on him.
Yeah.
That's like, that's a good. The final shot. It's iconic for a reason.
The investigator whole scene, how that
Everything,
shot.
like there's, again, it's like just listing all the shots I can think about, and none of them are these Blade Runner 2049 shots. But they're all great shots. Again, negatives aren't even the word, because again, as I say, it's like it is a top 3 horror for me.
I feel like I'll have more negatives than you will.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I think like even like looking at it, like thinking about it, we do start to slow down a bit with Sam and Lila. And even that, like, there's the moments where they go to the sheriff, and it's like I can't even recall this scene like ever, and it's not even a bad scene, but it's just like we're kind of like, all right, it's a bit slowing down the whole thing. You almost just want to just get to the Bates Motel, just get back to that location.
And it's also, I think the problem is it just starts adding loads of new people in. After the shower scene, like then it's just like, oh, the sister, oh. Thingy's back. Nothing
else after that lives up to the intrigue that we did just see.
Yeah.
Until we just get back to Anthony Perkins, I think. I think any time we're with him, it interesting.
Becomes interesting again, yeah.
Nor would I have wanted the whole film just to follow him after that.
Yeah.
Like, not like after shower scene, I wouldn't have wanted to just be a day in the life of Anthony of Norman Bates. I never want to be like, here's what could have made Psycho better. It's just me throwing ideas out. It's like maybe if her sister was introduced before, if we actually did see her relationship, so then it kind of did.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think maybe that might... Because I liked Vera Miles in the film, but I just feel like it is, like, I think she is... Like, Sam Loomis isn't an interesting character on his own at all. No. He's fine as a side character.
Yeah. I think it's also because the new characters aren't, like, flawed. Like, they aren't, like... interesting and like
it is like I'm the PI.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're the good guys now. We're going to take over and win.
And of course, like the whole psychiatrist thing is absolute dog shit. I can't. I honestly like it gets worse every time I see it again. If I'm being perfectly honest.
Why is he so like? He's just like
he did kill her, but he didn't.
Yeah,
it's like, stop talking in riddles.
He's like the mother. I just spoke with the mother. It's like, he's basically just telling everyone, shut the fuck up. I'm going to keep speaking right now.
And he does take his time just telling us that we know this. And people use the thing about like, oh, well, if you think about it in the like in that time period, maybe they wouldn't have understood. I'm like, I don't, but I also don't think we've lost intelligence.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like we're not stupid.
Like, I feel but it's like, there's films in the 50s that do things complicated and do things like that.
And people know about it enough during that time. Like, surely.
Like even if he didn't fully explain it was his mother's side. It's like, I don't know. I feel like you could just still stick with, like, it was horrifying. It's a good thing we did end with Anthony Perkins, because imagine if it's like, I'm going to explain everything, and then the end credit happens.
I would be like, this is the worst film ever.
What a dud landing. There's a lot of things you can pick apart this film and go like, there's a meaning. Like, I was reading, and again, it's an interesting thing in the sense of like, he's a taxiderm. He specifically he's doing birds specifically. Marion Crane is a bird. She's from Phoenix.
Oh my god.
You know, it's things like that. And one thing I was just like clicking with it goes like, and he's saying like he chooses birds and not beasts because you know they're a bit more. They never look as aggressive. It's like, oh, that's interesting. He doesn't look aggressive.
Yeah, and also,
and even when he is aggressive and all that, there's like things like that.
I also clocked in the mother's wardrobe. There was the fur coat with like the fox's head.
Oh, because he did say fox first, didn't he?
I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Never caught that.
Yeah,
I've heard two different arguments or like statements condemning the film. One saying it's a negative representation of trans community. And another saying it's a negative representation of mental health and split personality.
Yeah.
I can't see anything directly hurtful with trans representation. I can maybe understand the mental health split personality.
Yeah, I can understand that.
With the trans side of things, for me personally, again, a cis heterosexual male who doesn't identify as that, to me, it's not saying he's evil because he's this.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any point where Norman Bates is having a identity gender crisis.
Yeah.
I don't think that's at all his side of like that. Again, people might be able to dig deeper and find it. Yeah. I can't see that in any way. There's no. I guess someone could maybe look at again, if you really want to pull something, you might be able to look. He's looking through the peephole and he's watching her get undressed, and can he maybe be? But I've always looked at that more in terms of a semi-repressed sexuality.
Okay.
Side of thing, like not sexual, like he's suppressing his sexual desires.
Yeah, you've got to think this film is also from the 60s, right? And you've got way worse films that are way more negative about that around that time, and even further on, even early 2000s, everything. So
I even think if we still even want to pull like an Ed Gein inspired thing, I do think even like Silence of the Lambs can be looked upon more hurtful to the trans community. I think Buffalo Bill is a lot more of a hurtful
I would say so,
if you want to look at it in that realm than Norman Bates.
Even at the end, I mean, when it's sort of like the drab explanation sort of thing, I think the film purposely tries to be like, oh, it's more of like a mental thing. It's more like a trauma-based thing that's happened, and therefore, even when you see him like waltzing around, I guess he doesn't really like. You never are shown anything where he's like uncomfortable with his like gender, or anything like that. It's more of like a mental, like psychosis sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a film showing a man in women's clothing killing people, and making that an image of fear. Is what that is. But even I think like again we refer to it as like the psychiatrist info dump scene. They kind of even debunk that even being a factor in it, because they go, well, why was he wearing? I think it was Lila who was going, well, why was he wearing his mother's clothing? And the police officer says he was a trans. A term that shouldn't be used in today's society, but was very acceptable at that point. And then the psychiatrist goes, not exactly. Even right then and there, he goes, that's not what that is. He's not wearing that because it's a woman's clothing. He's wearing that because it's his mother's clothing.
At the same time, though, I can also see, like, if audiences watch this, I can also see then, therefore,
they will look at a man in women's clothing as like a vehicle for like, well, that's scary.
Yeah, and they could use the films in like the film for that. They can be like, oh my god, like it's.
I guess the imagery that the film presents doesn't help that. I think that's what it is. I don't think the film is making that the case.
They can take the wrong aspect away from it, and it probably has done some damage. So I can see why people, but I don't think during the time of Hitchcock making it, I don't think.
That wasn't even a talking point.
I don't think the awareness was even there, unfortunately. No. But
Again, I would be interested in doing another video with someone else.
Definitely.
More so just because I'm uneducated.
We don't know what we're talking about.
And I'm also fascinated. Now, in terms of the other side of things, is a hurtful representation of mental health.
I would say more.
I could understand that criticism more at this watch than I have done at my last watches before. Because my first, at one point I remember thinking to myself, well, they never outright name any sort of condition.
Yeah, that is true.
And again, I referenced a film that I do like a lot, but I can't acknowledge its faults in this field. The film Split.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
They outright say he's got DID, which is a real life thing.
A really bad representation.
And they show it like it's a supervillain power. Whereas, in my opinion, I think you could have done that. I think M. Night could have just made that film and just made up a condition. If you firmly secure anything in the world of its fiction, it can be a bit. I think it's more excusable, personally. Which is why I think within Psycho, there's nothing outright said. He has this. They don't even say he has split personality. It's very much so, very much so hinted at. It's like he's got the mother side and the Norman side.
Obviously, I don't know this, but like I also feel like Hitchcock maybe have just like have thought, I guess like Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde story. It was like, how can I make that more interesting in a way?
Shower scene happens. Runs out. He runs back in. He's shocked and horrified at what he sees. Then he cleans up. Is that a really harmful representation of someone with split personality disorder, where it's being shown that someone just goes, I'm a different person, I did this act, runs away, snap, wait, what happened? Or is it a storytelling device to make you think, to make the twist even more shocking?
Yeah, I would say it's more of a structure sort of, yeah.
I'm not a medical person, but from my understanding, split personality disorder isn't a fucking light switch that goes,
Yeah.
I'm now a new person. Now
Yeah.
I'm back to being this person. That's what's shown in that scene. But is that what actually is being done? Or is it just a thing where it's like, well, if we make him look like he knows what happened, they're going to be like, why isn't he shocked? And then the twist of him being the killer isn't as shocking.
Isn't as shocking, yeah.
Which is what I think is more of Hitchcock's thinking more of like...
Of the audience, of the film, of course he would. Like, yeah.
An entertaining experience.
Yeah.
A thrilling experience for viewers to watch. Not a, I need to do a commentary on society right now.
Obviously, there wasn't a full awareness of, like, mental health and so on. So I think people would just, like, say, obviously... the word crazy and whatnot, and then like they'd be like institutionalized or you know what, and like
he even
like
references it. That's also That's also a slightly fascinating thing. And the thing is, like, she goes, "Have you ever thought of putting it somewhere?" He goes, "Somewhere."
Yeah.
He's almost talking from experience as well.
Yeah. He's saying as if he's been. He's like the eyes and people. Yeah.
Yeah. For this period of time, do you think that's an acceptable thing to use as a vehicle for horror?
I feel like at the time it would have been, but I feel like, yeah, but also at the same time, like the whole thing was Split. Like Split's so recent, but like portrayal is worse than Psycho.
Because I think the appeal of horror, again, I don't know what you think on it, but I think the appeal of horror is delving into certain things, and delving into darker themes,
layers of psychosis
that do also show them, that also do hold a mirror. I think that's also a very important. I feel like that's a very important thing within horror, because not only does it hold a mirror in terms of like what's actually being shown, but it's holding a mirror in terms of how you are reacting to what you're seeing. And again, because I do think it is more of like you're looking at like, well, there are killers.
Yeah, of course there is.
So there is that thing. So people do have those thoughts.
Yeah. And with it,
but how do you portray it? I think is the best.
And it's with it based off Ed Gein
it's
as well.
inspired by Ed Gein within that.
So then it sort of, I guess it sort of like makes sense in a way. Like it's not like,
again, I need to read more about Ed Gein. I need to actually read the book.
When you were talking about, when you separated the questions of it being negative towards trans people and negative towards mental health, I guess if you then blur them, I guess it's not great. Of it being like, oh, trans people are mental. Sort of thing.
It's also another thing.
So
where
then,
it's
if you blur them, it's actually worse. But I also don't think it's saying that either.
I don't think it's saying that.
No.
Either. I think it's more so showing real people can also be a threat.
Yeah, which at the time there wasn't really films or about that. No one had really seen that, so it was quite revolutionary.
Which I also think, if you look at just the history of cinema and the history of horror, that is kind of what the industry took away from it.
Yeah.
We didn't get a string of evil cross-dressing men films.
Yeah.
And nor did we get a string of evil mental health people.
Yeah.
We just got a string of evil people.
Yeah.
As opposed to evil monsters.
Yeah.
I think.
And if you overanalyze like every
single horror film,
there's always going to be something that you could take away and be like, that's negative towards this, or that's negative towards that.
I feel like both of our favorite horror things, we can, if we really try to pull something, there is something problematic.
Definitely. There's always something problematic.
Yeah.
Like, but at the same time, like, a film still has to be a film. And
I think especially for horror films, they need to be challenging.
Yeah.
They need to make a viewer feel like you're confronting something.
Yeah.
Like a bit more than just, from the nature of it, it's not sunshine rainbow. So you need to do something that makes you that challenges your emotions a bit more. And being honest, you do need to like toe that line with it.
If the film turned out to be like, they find out that like he's got these sort of mental issues and stuff, and then so before any more damage happens, they take him to a hospital and he gets help and stuff. Then it'd be like, well, it's the most boring film I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
So then,
And then it is almost more like, see, we fixed him.
yeah,
And then I feel that's even a bit more problematic.
that is worse. Yeah, exactly. So you can't really win.
No, yeah,
You
exactly.
can never really win. And also, I guess in terms of like story, like when
Is that compelling?
when making a story, you always want to go to the most interesting thing is going to the extreme.
Yeah. In conclusion, Connor, does Psycho still hold up?
I would say so. Yeah, definitely. I think how it's made, the way it looks, the story, I think it still holds up. I was having a good time. Does it dip? Yes. But also, like, I think I have the negative experience of being a modern audience member, so I know how a lot of films work, and like, I guess in a way, even though it's like an old film, it sort of blew me away the fact that she was killed halfway, which would have been the same for audiences at that time.
Yeah.
So it's nice that it sort of like went full circle and bit as an audience member.
The fact that this film has been able to elicit conversation and still does with other people and still give a range of opinions and views. Again, because as I said, in my opinion, I don't think it is harmful towards trans representation, but then other people have very extreme
And that's
opinions
fair
on
enough.
that. To which exactly, and I don't think to which I think if a film that is 54 years old, no, 64 years old, 64 years old, can still have that, and also still be a compelling, just narrative.
Yeah.
I still I would say it still holds up while not being like ultimately problematic.
Yeah.
That has been our thoughts on Psycho. And again, I would like to revisit this film with another person's perspective. Once I know a human like that.
Matthew Vaughn.
Matthew Vaughn?
Isn't he in like a remake of Psycho or something?
Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn. Who's Matthew Vaughn? Wait,
he
no,
directed Kingsman. What's the next video? I think the next video on the channel would be it would be the first Intermission podcast.
Ooh, Intermission Kills.
Which is Intermission Kills podcast, not just Intermission podcast.
Robbie,
which is he might be.
He's under the table.
26th of August, not August, October. God, I'm all sorts. I'm just all sorts. But yeah, so that's the next video. Stay tuned for that. You can follow Intermission Kills on Instagram at Intermission Kills. And yeah, I believe that is all for it. Yeah, that's all I needed to say. So stay tuned, follow us, and we'll keep seeing the spooky season. Bye-bye.
Bye.